Welcome to the second part of my Super Nintendo project. In the first part, I did the recapping and soldering work, and in this part, we're going to be putting it back into the shell. I split the videos into two parts just because of how long they got, but you can find part one here. And here's part two. So start by putting the shield back on the soundboard. I assume this shielding is to protect it from the RF modulator, mostly, but doesn't make it less important. You don't want garbage sound, right? All right, we're going to assemble this back to test it, but let's discuss the shielding. So the original unit has these shielding plates. If this can come out, I could take this out and put it into the new clear bottom that we're going to be using, but I'm not going to. I debated on this. I don't like necessarily removing parts. Part of the point of a clear case, of course, is to see through it. That's the neat part about them. It's a little thing, but that's what makes us happy, right? But not at the expense of the machine working correctly, or who knows, causing interference or any other reason. The reason I came down on the side of not transferring those shields is because the Super Nintendo didn't ship with those shields in other regions of the world. For whatever reason, in the United States, the FCC required additional shielding. I don't know what the reasoning was exactly, but I'm kind of thinking if it wasn't necessary anywhere else, it's probably not necessary, period. Maybe it was just extra cautious, who knows. But I'm going to try it without, and if we see any problems, I'm going to keep it. I've got the shielding here, I can put it back in. I don't really expect problems though. First though, we are going to attach the heatsink. If we remember, the heatsink used those washer screws. Specifically, it used these I'm not sure what you call it. These washers that are spiky from the bottom. Don't know how much it matters that we get that right, but I like to get the right screws in the right holes. There's one exception that we'll get to later. Okay, and then we just have to put this one back into the MOSFET itself. Make sure it goes in nice and straight. Okay, now we can put this whole mess in here. This case did not come with anything other than the two halves of the shell and a set of screws. And the screws, I believe, are only for closing the actual case. It didn't even have instructions of any kind. So I'm going to assume I don't need to do any kind of modifications to the case. Sometimes you have to cut out a screw boss for one revision or another of the board. I'm going to assume that's not the case here, or they would have hopefully said something. Put the controller board in. It just sort of sits here, nothing special about it. The ribbon goes in here. Do the soundboard. The soundboard gets 2 screws here. Although I think I'm getting ahead of myself because I never put the actual motherboard into the case. However, I want to test this before I get too far back into the reassembly. So we're just going to sit this here. This is plugged in. We need the power switch, which goes in back here. Should only fit in one direction. Bend of the cable remembers if you don't, but you can also examine the orientation of the pins in the slot. Should be obvious which way it goes. Do signal cable. Power. And let's see what we get. We turn on this. I'm going to do it without a cartridge first. We get a power light. You see that? But the capture thing says nothing. I think you at least get a black screen, right? Let's try to make sure it's not some shenanigans. Okay. What the hell was going on there, but it reseated everything and replugged the capture device, and it looks like we're fine after all. Looks like we're getting audio. Picture looks fine. Let it run for a minute. Okay, that had me worried there for a minute, but couldn't figure out what I could possibly have done wrong, and turns out nothing. Okay, so let's continue with reassembly. Power. Okay, take the soundboard back off. because we need to get some of the case, or sorry, the motherboard screws down. I believe there was one here, because I couldn't see it earlier when you guys could. I seem to remember it being here. Now, this is a newly made case. The screw bosses are new, so they don't have an existing track. It's important that you get the screws in straight as you can. I think for now I'm going to set this aside because I have to look at this stuff. We need to transfer all this hardware into here. And be careful because there's a screw here. I mean, a spring here. But we do need these. And those just look like they snap in. So that should be relatively easy to lift out and transplant. Lift out and transplant. Or does that not want to transplant? Why is this difficult to fit? Strange. Not like there was lubrication in the original. Just snap these in. The reset switch fits nicely. I'm not quite sure what's going on with the power switch. It moved, but it's real tight. We need to put the door in. Pretty sure they aren't allowed to print Super Nintendo. So I'm sure there's no equivalent. That's a real strange piece right there. There's really nothing to hold this in place while you fiddle with this. I can't tell, did that stay? Yeah, good. Difficulty here is getting this spring up through the hole. Good, that wasn't so bad. Oh, but it fell off. I spoke too soon. Oh, okay, still not so bad. Get this around the hook. And we should have our barely springy reset button back. Good. Eject or lock, whatever you want to call it. Pivots on that. Put it back with it. Oh, wait. Don't forget, it has a hidden screw. Hidden screws are annoying, both in the disassembly phase and the assembly phase. Okay, now we can do the pivot screw for the anti-eject bar. And now we should be able to do the rest. Well, you know, it doesn't look that bad, really. Definitely could be worse. I'd like to find cooler plastics for that, but it's passable. It looks interesting. This could be cleaned up for sure. I will do that on my own time, though. Kept you guys around too long. Where'd the spring for this go? I put it aside for safekeeping and promptly forgot where. Always the way, huh? All right, so one side of that spring goes there. Where does the other side? Press against. I think it hooks. I see. There's a little hole. See how this spring hooks here, and on this side it has a protrusion. Well, the protrusion goes into a hole in the post here. So you have to try and get it there. Then slide this piece into position, lining that hook up, while also getting this rod through the center of the spring. A little fussy, but if you do it right, perfect. And now I think we're about done. Just have to put the top back on. And I did mention something earlier about some screw differences. The one thing the kit did include, I call it a kit, but it's really just a shell, is screws. They included 6 Phillips head screws. I believe the intent here is to replace the game bit screws that this originally came with the Phillips head that go in here. I think I'm going to go ahead and do that because these are also pointed screws. Should help them to drill the screw bosses better. And then I don't need a game bit to open it again. See if you can see the game bit versus the Phillips, and how the Phillips that they give you are sharp. Pointed, or probably a term for exactly what that is, but I don't know it. For now. Looks kind of cool. I like it from the sides and the front. Oh, mostly. I may end up wanting to retro-bright that. Overall, it's pretty neat. Grab the expansion port cover. Do a final test here and make sure we're still working, I guess. And we're back to that, huh? What is with that? So it got a little too late last night to finish looking into what was going on with this system. Coming back to it today, and happy to say we made some progress. So what was wrong, you want to know? Well, it was simple and stupid. Realized that the system was being held in reset. That's why we were never getting an image. Let's see, how's the best way to show this to you? You can see here, the way the reset switch mechanism works is that when you pull the switch, it presses down this black button on the motherboard. Now, what was happening, I mentioned earlier that sometimes these third-party cases that are remanufactured today, since they're made to fit all variations of motherboard, they sometimes have extra screw bosses or something that doesn't match every motherboard. I didn't notice any at the time I said that, but it was a little bit prophetic because while this doesn't have any extra screw bosses, at least for my model of Super Nintendo, it did have little plastic tabs. I'll include a picture of that. And these tabs look like they were meant to be for alignment purposes. As in, they fit next to the screw holes to line up the motherboard's holes with screw holes. Now, my motherboard only had 2 out of the 4 guiding pin holes. So what happened was the screws near the front of the unit, like here and on this side here, had little tabs next to the screw boss. That meant that the motherboard wouldn't lay flat. It was lifted a little bit. That lifting, which I didn't notice at the time, was causing the reset button on the motherboard to be pressed ever so slightly into the reset mechanism, even when it wasn't being pressed. That kept the system in reset mode and caused us to have no display. Now that I simply went back in and cut the little plastic tab, I probably can't see that, but just cut it off with flush cutters, reset the board, double checked everything for fitting well, and now the reset button works and the game starts right up. So, learned a few lessons here to check your fit better on these third-party replacement parts. This is a nice case. I don't want to sound like I'm too negative on it. I think the plastic is fairly high quality. It doesn't feel cheap. It feels actually very nice. It's extremely nice and clear. If you like that, then this is a thing. I would like it to have more replacement parts, or I would like more replacement parts to be available at least. Because I'm not sure that this patches of the original gray plastic showing through is really what you're going for when you have a clear case in the first place. But it's not bad, and I think it beats having a hole in the side of your case as my old one did. Now, as far as the capacitor replacement, I hadn't tried replacing SMDs with hot tweezers before, so certainly I think what happened was a learning experience. Whenever you make a mistake, that's the best way to take it, I think. With these tiny components, you don't want to expose them to heat for any longer than necessary, which is one reason to avoid the hot air approach. Because they can't take the heat, especially these electrolytic capacitors with electrolytic fluid inside. Even if they don't burst, you can boil it off and lessen their lifespan without even realizing it. It's just not a good thing to do. So the idea of hot tweezers is that you get the heat in a targeted place quickly and get the piece off as quickly as possible. And that was my mistake. I wasn't targeting the legs of the capacitor as directly as I should have. May not be using the right tip. I'm going to look into that a little more. But clearly I was looking back at the replay. Let's see if I can put it in here for you. And I wasn't making good contact with the legs on that, especially on that problem one. What I was doing instead was heating the plastic more, and I think that caused it to melt to the board and made the whole thing get stickier than it was. May also not have cleaned off the tips well enough from previous capacitors, so the heat may have not been transferring as nicely as it should have through plastic residue. Both easy mistakes to fix and won't happen again. But that is why I like to do these first-time things on my own units. That way, I feel good that whenever I'm selling a refurbished unit to someone on eBay or whatever it is, working on someone's repair, that I know I'm using techniques that are tried and true and things I've done before. Experiments are my problem, so that if something goes wrong, no one loses out, except me. Hey everyone, real brief follow-up on the Super Nintendo Reshell I did. I made some finishing touches that I wanted to show. With the help of Etsy, got this really cool metallic sticker here, branding it. And on the bottom, or well actually the back, we have our reproduction Nintendo service sticker to match the original. On the bottom, the holographic really cool metallic, or is it metallic? At least holographic. Um, you know, product patent, blah 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 sticker, which exactly matches the copy and the original too. These guys were a little different. Now, the same seller who made this sticker and this sticker also included a generic serial number sticker. I don't know where I put it, or I'd show it to you, but it has a generic made-up number, but in the same format. But it was a larger sticker with a barcode, and I think it was meant to go here. My original Super Nintendo didn't have such a thing, so instead I tried to transplant the metal stickers that it already had. With arguable success. This was already scratched up on my original, and I don't think there's any way to make it any better. Arguably, it might have looked better if I hadn't taken the originals because they look a little beat. But, you know, I heated them up a little bit, about 100 degrees hot air to make them peel nicer, and transplanted them. And this is at least my system's original serial number, which is why I wanted to try to preserve it at all. Anyway, I just wanted to show you can put the final touches nicely on here with some Etsy sellers, and I will include some links below for these particular ones. Hope you enjoyed.